boys back! Today I'll be taking you step by step on how to build your own arrows. Now what arrow are we going to be using? The Easton 6.0, possibly the best bang for buck hunting arrow out there. Step 1 for any arrow build is going to be research. You need to know what brand you're going to go with, what spine, what weight you'll be aiming for, what sort of things you'll be hunting, how much FOC do you want, and if you need a right or left spin. Up next you're going to want to assemble your tools. Can't build arrows without your tools. So first of all you're going to need a saw, something to chop them down to length with. Doesn't need to be anything flash. You can even use a Dremel. I wouldn't recommend doing it freehand. Build a little jig to sit it in and spin the arrow. Next, after you cut your arrows, you're going to need your little arrow squaring device. It's a G5 one there. It does a great job. This over here is the arrow spinning device. Just made out of a couple skateboard bearings on a piece of wood. You need something to stick your vanes on. This here is the Arizona Easy Fletch Mini Max Right. Gives a really nice helical. You get 3 vanes on at once. You're going to need a scale to make sure that your weights are all the same for all your different parts and arrows in the end. This is a reloading one. It doesn't have to be arrow specific. Even if you like weighing different sorts of white powders, you could probably use that one too. You're also going to need some sort of copper brush here. This just helps score the inside and helps give a bit of surface for the glue to adhere to. This here is a little conical Dremel grinding stone. One very specific job, just helps your knock sit flush, but I'll show you that later. And lastly, you're just going to need a whole bunch of Q-tips. Clean out your ears so you can listen to these pro tips, and also helps clean out the carbon dust after you cut an arrow. And now we have possibly my favourite part of the whole build, the purchasing of all the bits you'll need. Now if you want to follow along at home, these are the ingredients you'll need. Easton H-Knox, brass inserts, boning, stainless steel points, 125 grain, Q2I, 3-inch vanes, some nice super glue, and some epoxy for the inserts, and of course the Easton Sonic 6.0 shafts. Now before we go cutting our shaft, we'll have to work out how long it actually needs to be. Short, stiff and fast, that's the goal, eh? So chuck it in your bow, draw it back, and then you'll need to get a mate to mark how short it needs to be. I've got mine poking just past the riser. That means when I put broadheads on, there's no risk of them cutting my fingers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to spin them, check for any signs of wobbling, and that's the end we want to cut. So if it's wobbling on both ends, we'll cut both ends. If it's only one end, we'll just cut that end. So just give it a spin. Helps if you've got something on the end here to reference again. Now I can see that end's wobbling there, so I'm going to mark that with a silver sharpie. Now you need to bust out your calculator, do a couple quick equations and work out how much you need to chop off one end or both ends. Take your time, you can always take more off but you can't put it back on. Now before we get cutting, we want to make sure we've got our ears on and our eyes on. Safety first, eh guys? And also don't want to be breathing in that harmful carbon dust, eh? So we've got it hooked up to the old vacuum cleaner there. That should keep us nice and safe. We'll also chuck a mask on. Now make sure when you're cutting, you want to spin the arrow shaft the opposite way to which the saw is spinning. You get a better cut this way. So now that we've cut our shafts to length, all we need to do now is square them off. Mark both ends with silver sharpie and then just spin them about 10 to 15 times and just keep spinning until the sharpie's gone. Now your shafts are almost done, so from here you just want to give them a complete wipe down with isopropyl alcohol. Clean off any finger residue, any carbon dust there. Then you want to get your Q-tips and clean the insides out. And after you've done that, you want to go through and on the knock end, you want to round off the inside because the knocks actually, when they come in a mold, they're not perfectly square. So that helps them sit more flush. And then on your point end, you want to get your bore brush, jimmy it in and out there, just score up the insides of it here is nice. So, and then after you've done that, again, because you would have created a bit more dust, just go back through with the Q-tips and just give it a second last clean. Now depending on what end you cut, you might need to remove your labels. You don't want your vanes having to glue over the label. They're not going to adhere as well as what they would just to the straight carbon. So all we need to do is grab a little bit of acetone, get a Q-tip, rub it along the label. Careful not to slop it everywhere, you don't want to degrade the carbon. Now just get your scouring pad and just scrape it off and just finish up with a bit of cleaning with the isopropyl alcohol. It's not hard at all to do, extra couple minutes and you'll get a much better finish in the end. Now I finally finished stroking off my shafts and playing with them, but unfortunately that's not all the prep work done yet. We've still got an extensive amount to do on the vanes. Now the main thing I'm worried about on these little guys is any release agent that may still be on it, and that's going to make it hard for the glue to stick to the vane. So we want to get that off. We're going to pay a lot of attention to these. So step 1 for these guys is I'm going to stand them over here. Just going to rough up that surface a little bit, help adhesion, and then I'm going to move over and use some Q-tips and acetone just to wipe off the bases. And then I'll just put them on a separate little piece here to dry. It's easy, if you've got 2 different pieces, it's easy to tell which ones you've done on. Now normally that would be all your prep done and you'd be onto the assembly, but I've got one stage left. I'm using these brass inserts here. They're a snap-off one, so they go from 75 to 50 grain. So I'm using them just to bump my FOC up. Now I've got to Dremel these off and try and make them all weigh 50 grains, which can be a bit of an ask. Now you can snap these off, but I think you get better consistency just taking the time and using the Dremel there. As you can see, we've got a max variation of 0.3 grains, which is absolutely nothing. And now it's time for the best and possibly most frustrating part, turning your shafts into arrows. Step 1's gluing our inserts in. You just cut the end of a Q-tip off there, makes a nice steering stick. Make sure we get equal parts epoxy and just keep stirring till you think your arm's going to fall off. Now before you put your insert in, make sure you take the knock off, that way you won't get any air pressure trying to push the insert out again. And you'll see here you don't need bugger or glue. I always put way too much on, so just use it sparingly. Now take your time putting your veins in your jig, make sure they're all sitting in the same depth and everything. Not so much a problem with this, but with the bits it can be a bit tricky. When we go to put the glue on, we really want to use as little as possible. Again, I suck at this. I always end up putting too much on and having to wipe off heaps of excess, so this little goes a long way with these things, and the less you use actually the better they stick. All you gotta do is insert your arrow and gently put the arms up there. You know, it can get out of control if you let it. You need to slide the tension cap down. Again, you just want to be careful taking these off. You don't want to rip them off and take a vein with it, so just be gentle on it. There you go, nice finish there. Now I'm just wiping off the excess glue. I'm just adding a dab of glue to the front and back of each vein just to help it stay in place. Now every now and then you're going to have to clean your fletching jig. Just use a bit of acetone. This one here, you can even give it an acetone bath. Quickly weighed the shaft to see what the sort of weight variance would be dealing with, and as I suspected, it was bugger all. These components were all within 0.1 of a grain of each other, so I wasn't that surprised to find out they were 1.4 grains apart, so they should shoot more consistently than me downrange. And once you finish putting them together, all you got to do is spin test them and shoot them through paper. If you spin test them and you find any a little bit wobbly, just mark the veins. I've just gone and put some dots on these ones so I can spot them easily, and then if there's ever a bad shot or something where the arrow's most likely going to get destroyed, that's probably the arrow you want to send downrange. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to shoot these arrows through paper with my bow. If your bow wasn't tuned, there's probably not much point to this, because it's not going to be a judge of your arrows, it'll just be a judge of your bow more than anything. This right here will be the test, the proof in the pudding, to see if we've selected the right spine and we've got everything else set up good. So see how it goes, fingers crossed. Perfect, there you go, a couple bullet holes, pretty happy with that. So now let's go to the range and test them out. So in the end, what did we finish with? Well, I think we finished with the perfect hunting arrow there, coming in at a weight of 466 grains, FOC of 13.7, and a speed of 274 feet per second. I mean, that is just ideal figures for all sorts of animals, from bloody rabbits up to big red deer. That's what I wanted, one arrow to do everything. I didn't want to have to mess around with several different sight tapes. So you're probably wondering what the final price on these puppies was. With a field point, $15.20. And if we're going to the Exodus Broadhead 125 grain tips, that bumped the price up to $27.65. And then to finish, we've also got the Strickland Helix 2-blade, slightly more expensive, and I bumped the price up to $37.85. Needless to say, if there's any goats come along, I might be strapping an old Muzzy onto the front, because yeah, those broadheads certainly up the price. But hey, they fly really well, you get what you pay for. Drop a comment if you think you have a better recipe for an arrow that is a one-size-fits-all situation. But until then, thanks for watching. See you guys on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers.